G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to Abandoned Ship with Mags. So Abandoned Ship is a new game created by independent developer Fireblade Software that has just entered early access on Steam. However, you may be hard pressed to notice that, but we'll get to that in a minute. First things first, what is Abandoned Ship? Well, on its most basic level, it's FTL with tall ships and a story that would seem fitting in some kind of Cthulhu epic, or a game like Sunless Sea. Without going into spoilers, you start the game by escaping from a cult and stealing a ship, but before that you have to select a group of prisoners to free. These prisoners will become the crew of the ship, and you have 5 options to choose from. The Navigator, who increases the speed that your ship can move and change positions in combat. The Gunner, who is able to reload whatever cannon he is manning at a higher speed. The Marine, who is a dedicated melee combat specialist. The Surgeon, who can heal crew members, but more importantly can heal crew members away from the ship's medbay. And the Sailor, who can repair damage to the ship at a higher rate. These 5 represent the 5 crew types in the game, and you will be able to select 3 of them. Once that's done, you board your ship, cut the ropes, and sail into the adventure. Now, I just realised how closely this is sounding to a review, and it's not. Abandoned Ship has only just entered Steam Early Access. However, as I mentioned before, you can be forgiven for not noticing that. At this point, I have put around 18 hours into the game, and I'm yet to encounter a bug. All of the game's systems, from the procedural generation of the maps to the combat systems, are fully functional, and even the AI is quite clever, putting up quite the challenge. Now, that's not to say that it's actually done. The main story reaches a particular point and then simply ends. The remainder of the story is yet to be added. Currently, the choices you make over the course of the game world don't seem to affect the game world around you in the manner promised. However, that too is something on the list of things to add. Basically, everything in the game is currently fully functional, so in its current state, Abandoned Ship works and is fully playable. The early access period is simply to add more, expanding on the current game and the combat systems, expanding on the story until ready for full release. So, back to the gameplay. The game essentially plays in 2 areas, the map and the combat screen, with everything else being handled by pop-ups or menus. On the map screen, which is really kind of beautiful to look at, it's a square box with a number of exits around the outside corresponding to the world map view. However, the borders of the map are framed like a 17th century painting. In fact, the whole aesthetic of the game is meant to carry the look of a 17th century oil painting, with the underside of the ocean under the wave effects clearly displaying what is meant to look like brush strokes, appropriate for the time period, and of course the map's fog of war being a blank canvas. From the world map view, you must uncover your surrounding environment along with the missions and events within an area. Now, you are required to activate a certain number of these events in each area in order to unlock the gates on the exits to the map, allowing you to move into new areas. However, being a roguelike, these events are not always to your benefit. Sometimes nothing at all will happen. Sometimes a rat will eat a large amount of your supplies. Sometimes you'll rescue a ship's crew and be rewarded for it, and sometimes you'll come across a floating ghost ship crewed by the dead that will lower your own crew's morale. And of course, sometimes you'll wind up directly in combat, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, the maps themselves are procedurally generated. All of the art assets are created by hand, and then the computer will randomly assemble them, so each time you play you will not wind up with a series of maps that are exactly the same. But the map layer itself is not the only part of this that is actually procedurally generated. So are the weather effects, and these have a huge impact on combat within the game. On a calm map with no weather, things are going to go pretty much as you would expect. However, if you go into a map that has a raging storm across its entire area, all combat within that particular zone is going to have some interesting changes. For example, waves will be striking the enemy ship and your own ship, so as you are trying to fire the cannon, the ships are going to be moving around far more than you would expect them to. As a result, accurately hitting the point that you are telling your gunners to aim the cannon at may be impossible. Likewise, striking a particularly large wave in your ship may result in some of your crew members falling overboard, in which case you're going to have to rapidly try and recover them before they end up drowning. The very next map over might have a extremely cloudy sort of a look to it, in which case combat will be covered in a dense white fog. which will obscure your vision to the enemy ship, preventing you from using certain weapons or certain abilities because you cannot actually see the enemy, and you'll have to get very close to them in order to be able to clearly see the ship and utilize some of the weapons that you actually have. And this goes on and on. There are maps with active volcanoes in them that will rain fiery magma from the sky that, if it strikes your ship, will set your ship on fire and do large amounts of damage to it. There are maps with raging storms where lightning bolts will ripple through the map constantly. If they strike any of your crew members, they will do devastating amounts of damage, if not killing them outright. If they strike your ship, they can set the decks on fire and cause extreme damage. Now, combat itself is simple to control, but surprisingly deep once you start looking at some of the options. As you can see with our combat here, it is pretty straightforward in its layout. The top section of the screen is devoted to the enemy ship, which includes its health bar, how much water it's taken on, and of course on the right hand side, the current status of each of its modules, which includes the main, mast, cannons, and so on. In the center of the screen, to the left-hand side, you have our distance indicator. The marker at the top is always the location of the enemy ship. The blue ship is your location, and this is where you can tell your navigator to change ranges. Now, this is where a bit of the depth comes in. The standard cannons can be fired over any range, however you can equip your ship with short-range weapons designed just to attack the crew or just to attack the hull. Different weapons will have different optimal ranges, so trying to maintain the gap between the enemy ship and your ship is incredibly important. The other side of it is the enemy ship will also be trying to change into its optimal position to fire its weapons and whatever its loadout is. So you'll have to be countering the enemy ship's position while you are trying to position yourself. Now the bottom of the screen, as you can see, is a reflection of the top, with the health bar for the ship's water level, and of course the ship's module status on the right hand side. However, we've got a couple of extra options here. Above the health bars on the bottom left hand corner of the screen is the health bars for each and every one of your individual crew members, which you will have to move around to actually get them to operate certain systems on the ship. You will also need to watch their health to keep them alive. In the center of the screen between the modules and the health bar, you have the ship's maneuvering settings. If you have a good navigator, you can do special maneuvers that will allow you to change sides on the enemy ship, or potentially turn around, retreat from combat, as well as brace yourself against particular environmental hazards or things that the enemy ship may do. Now the main cannons on each ship, providing they're manned, will auto-fire continuously at a point that you have told them to shoot. However, the special weapons on the ship will need to be manually activated. Things such as the chain shot and grape shot cannons for attacking either crew members or the sails in order to reduce the enemy ship's maneuverability, sniper rifles or other such weapons for directly attacking the enemy crew, and of course later in the game you can fit your ship with mortars, which you can also use to bombard the ship from range. But these will all need to be not only manned by a crew member, but they will need to be manually activated by you, the player, every single time you want to use one. Now the last thing to mention here is exactly how your crew members earn their skill points. This is a game where your crew skills up by doing, so if you want your navigator to become a better navigator, you better keep him at the wheel of the ship all the time, and you better be maneuvering the ship, changing distance from the enemy ship, activating special maneuvers and so on. If you want your gunners to reload faster, you better keep them on the guns and have them constantly firing those weapons as often as you possibly can. But it also works in cross-training. If you want your medic to become a more efficient melee fighter, then when you're boarding enemy ships, you better get him onto that deck too and get him into the fight. Or if you want that sailor to be able to reload the guns faster, then you better get him manning the guns rather than repairing the ship, so that he actually learns that. And yes, because I know it's going to pop up all through my comment section of this video, what about the Kraken? Well, here's the Kraken. I'm not going to say anything about it because the Kraken is heavily tied into the storyline and I am not doing spoilers in this video. So, yes, there's a Kraken. It's tied to the story. Watch a Let's Play if you want to find out more, or play the game yourself. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you very much for watching. As I said at the start of this video, this wasn't a review, just a general going over of everything that's inside of Abandoned Ship and my first impressions of it. I will of course be coming back to do an actual review once the game comes out of early access, which I believe the developers were aiming at around the 8 to 9 month point the last time I checked. So until then, there probably will be some Abandoned Ship put up on the channel, and I'll definitely be streaming some of it in the next couple of days. So until then, remember to check the video description down below for links to all of my social media and to my Twitch channel. Remember to click that like button on the video, and remember to share and subscribe if you would like to see more. And until next time, take care.